I'm just over here praying away. And in fact, I'll just mention something I wasn't planning on saying. But when I do teach my students, if they are going to pray, I teach them to pray like this. See, in our classes, when I teach my students, we get our qigong, we get our energy. So your energy is moving around your body, and you can get pluses and minuses. You can get it to circulate, or plus and a plus, and push against each other, and all this type of stuff. So the point being is, if you take this thing that's in your mind, this prayer, and you can imagine it, focus it down here, and then turn it into energy and project it upward, and maybe imagine that you're aiming it right at the telephone that God's sitting next to, having a martini, then who knows, maybe your prayer will work. But anyway, where do we go? Did I actually sign in? Hello there, Buddha Z here. And today we're going to talk about, this is one of my fun poems. I actually like, I think I mentioned this one. I smile just thinking about it. And one of the reasons I couldn't really be a good comedian, perhaps, or I could have been a good one, but it would be limited because I don't like trash talking people or making fun of people or humiliating people, even if they deserve it. Because if they deserve it, it's possible I might do it. So I don't really want that job, though, even if I could be good at it. I don't think it's good for me. But here I am trash talking somebody. And I like this poem. It's called Godfather of Poetry. And this is a true story, and I'm just giving you all the details of it, which is kind of fun. That's one thing about poetry. It tends to be less fantasy or something. But anyway, here we go. Godfather of Poetry. I just performed with the Godfather of LA poetry. He publishes books, collections of poets. Today he was featured poet in NoHo City. I made him laugh before the event. We viewed each other's books and reached an agreement. It's hard to live on poetry publishing royalty. Because no one buys a poetry book. Why should they bother to give it a look? Most of today's poetry doesn't even rhyme. There's no punctuation or capitalization most of the time. If a poet is going to ignore a proper way to rhyme and write, why should a reader pay for such a disorganized sight? Personal view. I read him a poem, Romantic Chaos. He grumbled that all love is a loss. I read him a poem, The Meaning of Life, next. I was surprised his impression was perplexed. I told my friend that Godfather was not amused. My friend said, "Didn't you hear the name of his book? He's lived a life of being self-abused." This led to a final epiphany regarding my poetry writing community. Most of these quitters, whiny bitches, and sissified men are here to share with us what their friends don't want to hear again. Poetry groups will rattle your brain with all the social, sexual problems teenagers should abstain. When the gray spiders speak of love, they sound like web-weaving regrets of pain. Well, poetry has become an archaic leech into our stuck-in-a-car-seat, can't-leave-this-place mind, then injecting us with their misery. We don't want to know what they have to find. But anyway, psychiatrists like ambulance chasers should discover their poetic basket cases where, well, do we make them stronger by covering up our faces and politely pretending that we care? Anyway, now I confess my poetry contains many unresolved issues from my unsolved brains. And I endure, resist, learn, and comply with problems. Well, my problems are expressed resolving my why. But back to the poet Godfather of LA. Why would I want for poetry to pay? Well, perhaps he can enlighten and illuminate by sharing with us the path of his soul. But Why do I want to follow a self-destructive asshole? Well, when your poetry confesses and expresses a mistake, shouldn't it enlighten us to a better path to take? But if the Godfather is leading lemmings to his cliff to join him and die, I have another question to ask. Why? Who should read this poetry that details how to live your life wrong so it fails? He'll provide reasons poetically verified why failure he tried. Anyway, poets are the sages and leaders of every society. Huh? Uh-oh. Poets are the dreamers of peace, love, and philosophy. I think we're still doing that. As every teen generation seeks an image of a better person, there are plenty of bipolar emotional men and women to teach you about bitchin' and cursin'. If I want to blend in with the millennial soul, I would learn philosophy from the Godfather of poetry, because he's a real asshole. Well, can I say this poem? The poem just speaks for itself. See you later. Bouazi has explained who the Godfather of poetry is.